Wow, man, we got a lot going on here at the Law and Crime Network. A lot of legal issues going on, a lot of interesting cases, but a lot of great guests, too. With me in studio, Professor Kirk Burkhalter. How are you, sir? Nice to meet you. Now, if I understand this, you were a detective first grade in the NYPD for 20 years,
right,
and then started a secondary career, went to law school while you were a detective, and then practiced for a little while. Now, you're at New York Law School, and you've been teaching there for 20 years in the criminal world, if you will, teaching kids about the criminal law.
Yes, well, I've been teaching there about 11 years.
11 years,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
okay.
Criminal law and writing and so forth. So.
Oh, excellent. Great to have you. Okay. And Joseph Tully, 15 years with us. He's via Skype as a criminal lawyer, over 1,000+ felony matters as well as other criminal law related matters, certified criminal law specialist, one of the top 100 lawyers on the National Trial Lawyer Assessment, and wrote a book, California, A State of Collusion. And I read that description that you have on your website, Joseph, and boy, it's very fascinating. I'm going to get the book. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so now we got Gene Rossi with us as well, but we're going to go back into court, and I'll be back with my great guests when we have a break. All right, home court advantage. Professor, you're going to go first. I mean, myself and Gene Rossi, who's also on the show with us today, he had 30 years at DOJ. I was a prosecutor for many, many years myself and do criminal defense work. It's interesting what's happening here. So they kept the direct very limited, and the legal argument that's being made there is that the prosecutor wants to get back to the murder, that which was discussed during the guilt phase of the case, and he wants to lace every question with the murder of the victim, and she objected. The judge has sustained it 2 or 3 times. Is that a fair cross-examination question?
It's fair in the prosecutor's mind.
Right, right.
So, you know, his entire theory here is that I was forced to do these things by the state. You know, during the trial, we saw the parole officer here. It's because of the Bureau of Prisons, and I suffered this irreparable harm and so forth. And it's the prosecutor that wants to get this back to what the point is, supposedly, of this proceeding.
Right.
It's a penalty phase of the crime he was convicted for. So he's attempting to remind the jury,
right,
this is why we're here. When the Bureau of Prisons is not on trial, no one else is on trial, he was on trial.
Now, interesting, Professor, what I would have done was I would have been jumping up as a defense lawyer after the first question and gone to the sidebar and said, no, Judge. He's not going to be lacing every question, irrespective of how the defendant answers, by bringing up stuff about the murder of the victim that was not brought out on direct examination. I would have been the one there, not the prosecutor.
I would absolutely agree with you. So after that first question, it's clear, and as a matter of fact, prior to him asking that question, it's clear where this was going.
Right.
So that's when you want to stop, you want to object, get the sidebar, and try to lay the ground rules.
Right, because by the very question, even though they're being sustained, the prosecutor's making a point to the jury. Joseph Tully, I got to ask you, my friend, all this stuff about the bad stuff that those prison officials are doing, is this something that's consistent with your understanding of things, especially given the book that you wrote?
It is consistent with it. I believe that the prosecutors use this technique. I think really, on one level, the legal reasoning is accurate that you're talking about. But on another level, he's trying to instigate the defendant. He's trying to rile him up so that he looks like a jerk again in front of the jury.
Yeah, Gene Rossi, what do you think about the technique, or is when sometimes you stand well, stand still?
I mean, the prosecutor?
Yeah.
I think if he keeps doing this and the objections are sustained, he's not going to look very, very good in front of the jury.
Yeah, definitely. So just very quickly, defense attorney, as far as the examination was concerned, effective or not effective? Professor, we'll start with you.
I don't think that effective, but once again, they're making the best of what they have.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get your other answers on the other side because we got to do a little business. We're going to go back to Scott Nelson inside that court. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Wow. Okay. Well, trial nut from once again another shout out to her from the or him. I'm not sure which from the website there. Dripping sarcasm. This is so good, Professor. Is he scoring points? And my second question is, why not kill Dominguez then with this whole story as opposed to this random person? What do you think? Is he helping himself out here?
I don't think he's helping himself out, and here's the reason why. And this is simply my opinion. Who knows what's in the head of the jurors? He is spinning a very long story, and there is a lot of this that is somewhat unsupported. You know, he keeps saying, for instance, I can prove everything. Well, if he could have proved everything, some of this may have come out of trial. He mentioned this captain in the correctional facility that set him up for this sex crime, and that this person was fired. That's a crime, and he can't remember the person's name. And I can tell you from my experience in law enforcement, defendants remember the names of those folks in law enforcement who they interact with.
Right.
So there's a lot here that's unsupported, and it just seems like he's kind of spinning a story.
Gene Rossi, what are your thoughts? Same question to you.
I got to respectfully disagree with the professor. Maybe I've been watching this trial too much. I got to say, I wish I could watch the jury. I find him very engaging. I really do. Maybe because I've worked with a few probation officers, and you notice the prosecutor is not challenging anything he's saying. He's basically letting him talk, and he's not even cross-examining. He's letting him talk so much, the defense attorney's objecting because of narrative.
Yeah, Gene, but this is what we talked about before, about when you stand well, stand still. I just don't get what line of questioning this is helping the prosecution either. It may not be helping him, but the prosecution is winning this case right now. All you could do is let him talk to that one juror who just may feel bad about all this.
Oh, I agree with you. Is he going to persuade all 12? No. Is he going to possibly persuade one or two to say, you know what? The government did not challenge what he said. The probation officer, after 6 weeks, allegedly ruined a great job, and he had a place to live. And the guy just went crazy. But what the professor said, this doesn't explain away taking Jennifer's life, but at least it kind of mitigates a little bit from the heinous crime he committed.
Joseph Tully, unfortunately, I don't have time for you right now, but I promise you will be the first question out of the gate when we come back on the other end of this break. Stick with us. Okay, the testimony is done. We're going to be putting clips together for you guys so you can see the whole thing. It wasn't really overly dramatic. The best part of what the defendant testified to came out really in direct examination. Personally, I think the prosecutor didn't score much of any points on cross-examination, and we go back to that principle, if you stand well, stand still. Joseph Tully, now you're the guy that wrote the book, California State of Collusion. Let me ask you, do you think that him going through the recitation of chapter and verse about the sprinklers being broken and knee deep and fire retardant and feces and urine and having to clean it itself and all of the other litany of things he talked about with the prison officials, and then ultimately this probation officer Dominguez, who he directly indicates is the person who got him fired from a place where he finally had a job, he finally had a place to stay and rest his head. Can they get one juror on this?
Perhaps. I think the message that was going to the jury is twofold. Number one, there might be one juror on the panel who knows what they really do to inmates, how they really treat them, how they really treat their probationers, their prisoners, and it's not good, it's not fair at all. So his message might resonate with, one or two jurors. I wouldn't think that it would resonate with the majority of them, because the main thing is he's not showing compassion. He's not showing remorse. He wants us to feel sorry for him, and yet he's not showing any sort of compassion or remorse for the victim that he brutally killed.
Well, Joseph, one other question, since you're in this world, and maybe the professor can answer this too, and certainly Gene, but to you first. He says that these officials in the Bureau of Prison are actually trained to harass the inmates as a control mechanism, to antagonize them. Has that been your experience?
I don't know. I think they do get training some places. For instance, law enforcement, if they come off imperious, they'll get a better response through intimidation sometimes with some people. But a lot of it is power corrupts, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. And the people in charge of prisoners, through maybe even no fault of their own, just succumb to that power trip.
Well, Professor, I mean, you spent many years as an NYPD first grade detective and now are teaching at law school and are a lawyer yourself. What are your thoughts on that? Are they trained this way, or is that urban legend?
So I think the answer is not as easy. So are they trained this way? Is there a manual that says you must do X, Y, Z? Absolutely not. I don't believe that. However, when you put folks in that environment, right, and they're responsible for the safety of themselves, safety of the prisoners, controlling that population, there are a lot of different things that happen. We all know that it wouldn't be an overstatement to say that our correctional system in this country is somewhat broken, right? Quite often prisoners go in and they come out better criminals than when they went in based on the conditions. But whether how much of that of what he's describing is institutionalized, it's impossible to say, and I think that it varies from facility to facility.
And I would say also, Professor, that it could vary from individual inmate to inmate depending on what their security status is and how they're acting.
Absolutely. I want to throw out there, and this is one of the few jobs where if you don't take command of your job, what you do, you risk harm and dying.
Yeah.
So there's a lot on the line. There's no easy answer.
And Gene, when we talk about the criminal justice reform and people getting out, I'm just thinking of a lawyer friend of mine. I mean, there is some truth to the fact they get out, they're in a halfway house, they've lost their licenses, their livelihoods, and years later, nobody will employ them. And it's not surprising that many of them wind up back into the system. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'm on the board of a group called Friends of Guest House, and it's a reentry program to help individuals, women with addiction issues, make that difficult transition from confinement to the community. And that period from confinement to when you're transitioning, that is the hardest part of a convicted felon's life, because you don't get all the tools you need to get back into society, and yet I'm doing bad things, and of course he murdered Jennifer.
I'll go back to my basic point that none of this had anything to do with the innocent victim in this case, who wasn't a prison official, wasn't a probation officer, and I think that's going to speak very loudly to this jury that this is all made up. What it was a stalking attempt to rob this woman, torture, brutalize, and murder her. I still don't think they get over the hump, but it was some interesting testimony nevertheless. Professor, it's been great having you on. You'll stay for the next show, so don't go anywhere. And Gene and Joseph, thank you so much for your time. Guys, Michael Bryan is next. He's going to be taking all of this stuff and bringing it to you. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you on Wednesday.